The day I disappeared, without warning, I stopped responding. No explanation, no warning, no "I'm busy." I simply disappeared. And if you think this is just another tactic to make him chase you, you're already missing the point. Because what happened over the next 3 days exposed something much deeper than his behavior. It exposed mine. You know that feeling when you send a message and keep checking your phone, hoping to see his name pop up? That silent tension, that waiting, that need for validation you don't even want to admit. I was there, replying fast, being available, trying to keep the connection alive as if it depended only on me. Then something clicked. I realized I was always present, always accessible, always predictable. And that predictability was killing any sense of value I thought I had. So I made a decision that felt uncomfortable, almost wrong. I chose to step back completely. No messages, no reactions, no signs of life. Not to manipulate him, but to finally see what would happen if I stopped trying. What I discovered in those 3 days is something most women never allow themselves to see. And if you're tired of feeling ignored, overlooked, or emotionally drained, you need to understand this before you make your next move. The invisible pattern that makes you easy to ignore. Before I disappeared, I thought I was doing everything right. I was attentive, present, emotionally available. I replied fast, showed interest, tried to keep things flowing. On the surface, it looked like effort. But in reality, it was something else entirely. It was a pattern where you give more than you receive, where you anticipate his needs but ignore your own, where your attention becomes so constant that it loses weight, not because you lack value, but because you are offering it without any filter. Here is the part most people do not want to admit. When you are always there, always ready, always responding, you remove any sense of uncertainty. And without uncertainty, there is no curiosity. Without curiosity, there is no pursuit. He does not need to think about you because you are already there. He does not need to reach out because you always do. Over time, your presence becomes expected, not appreciated. And that is where the shift begins. Not when you try harder, not when you explain yourself better, but when you recognize the pattern that is silently lowering your value in his eyes. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And the moment you break that pattern, everything starts to change. Why disappearing triggers? His attention. The moment I pulled back, something shifted. Not immediately on his side, but in the dynamic itself. Because when you remove what was constant, you create a gap. And the human mind is wired to notice gaps. When someone is always present, the brain stops registering their absence. But when that presence suddenly disappears, it creates tension. A question forms. Where did she go? Why is she not here? That question is what reactivates attention. It is not about playing games. It is about understanding perception. When you are predictable, you are easy to overlook. When you become unpredictable, you become interesting again. He starts checking his phone more often. He replays past conversations. He wonders if something changed. Not because you begged for attention, but because you removed it. And here is the key detail. This only works when your absence is real. Not a strategy filled with anxiety. Not a silent countdown waiting for his message. It has to come from a place where you are genuinely stepping back. Because people do not respond to what you do. They respond to the energy behind what you do. And if your energy is still chasing, even in silence, he will feel it. But if your energy shifts into detachment, into self-control, into quiet confidence, that is when his attention begins to return. And once that attention is back, the dynamic is no longer the same. The silence that confronts you. First, not him. The hardest part was not waiting for his message. It was facing myself without the distraction of him. The moment I stopped reaching out, there was nothing left to hide behind. No conversation to check, no reply to expect, no illusion of control. That is when the discomfort started. Your mind begins to race. You question your decision. You imagine the worst scenarios. Maybe he lost interest. Maybe he never cared. Maybe you pushed him away. The urge to break the silence becomes almost unbearable. This is the part nobody shows you. The internal battle. Because when you are used to seeking validation, silence feels like rejection, even when it is self-imposed. And that is exactly why most people fail at this step. Not because it does not work, but because they cannot tolerate what it reveals. It reveals how attached you were, how much of your emotional state depended on his responses, how quickly your mood shifted based on his attention. And that realization is uncomfortable, but it is also powerful. Because once you sit with that silence, without running back, something starts to change. You begin to separate your value from his behavior. You start to see that the need to reach out was never about him. It was about the space he occupied inside you. And the moment you stop filling that space with him, you start reclaiming it. That is where real control begins. The illusion of control you must break. I used to believe that if I said the right thing, at the right time, in the right tone, I could influence how he felt about me. That if I showed enough interest, enough care, enough presence, I could keep him engaged. It felt like control, but it was not. It was dependence disguised as effort. Because every message I sent was not just communication, it was a silent request. Notice me, choose me, respond to me. And the more I tried to control the outcome, the more I gave away my position. When I disappeared, that illusion collapsed. There was nothing left to manage. No conversation to steer, no reaction to analyze, no strategy to adjust, just space. And in that space, one truth became impossible to ignore. You cannot control how someone feels about you. You can only control how you show up. Trying to control his attention is what keeps you attached. It traps you in a cycle where your emotional state depends on something you do not own. And that is the shift most people resist, because letting go of control feels like losing. But in reality, it is the only way to stop losing yourself. When you stop trying to manage his perception, you redirect that energy inward. You become less reactive, less available, less predictable, not as a tactic, but as a consequence of reclaiming your focus. And that is when the dynamic changes for real. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped chasing it. The exact moment the dynamic starts to shift. It did not happen with fireworks or a sudden confession. The shift was subtle, almost quiet. But once it started, it was impossible to ignore. On the third day, something changed. Not just in him, but in me. I was no longer checking my phone every few minutes. I was no longer waiting. That urgency, that need to see his name on the screen, started to lose its grip. And that is when it happened. A message. Simple, casual, almost as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Because this time, I was not reacting from the same place. I was not rushing to reply. I was not overthinking what to say. I had space. And that space gave me something I did not have before. Control over my response. Here is what most people miss. The power is not in making him come back. The power is in who you are when he does. Because if you are still the same person, still seeking, still available in the same way, the dynamic resets instantly. Nothing changes. But if you use that time to detach, to observe, to step back emotionally, then his return meets a different version of you. A version that does not need immediate validation. A version that chooses how to respond instead of reacting automatically. That is the moment the balance shifts. Not when he texts, but but when you no longer feel the urge to answer right away. What he really thinks when you disappear. When you vanish without explanation, his first reaction is not clarity. It is confusion. He tries to make sense of the sudden silence. You were present, responsive, engaged, then nothing. That contrast creates a question he cannot immediately answer. At first, he may assume you are busy. Then he checks again. No response. That is when curiosity turns into attention. He starts replaying interactions, looking for signs he missed. Did he say something wrong? Did something change? Why is she not here like before? This is where perception shifts. Your absence forces him to feel what he never had to feel when you were always available. Uncertainty. And uncertainty creates mental space. Space where you exist without trying. But here is the deeper layer most people overlook. It is not just about him missing you. It is about him reevaluating you. When your attention is no longer guaranteed, your value is no longer fixed in his mind. It becomes fluid again. He starts to see you differently, not as someone who will always be there, but as someone who can step away. And that signals something powerful: self-respect. People are drawn to what they cannot fully predict or control, not because they enjoy games, but because unpredictability demands presence. It pulls them in. However, this only holds if your silence is consistent. If you disappear and return out of impulse, the effect collapses. The mystery disappears, and so does the shift. So what he really thinks is not just where did she go? It becomes something deeper. Why does her absence feel different this time? And that question is what keeps you on his mind. Why some women disappear and nothing happens. Not every silence creates impact. Some women disappear and are met with more silence. No message, no curiosity, no shift. And that is where frustration begins. Because the problem is not the action of disappearing. It is the intention behind it. If you disappear while still emotionally attached, still checking your phone, still hoping for a reaction, nothing really changed. Your body is absent, but your energy is still chasing. And people feel that, even without words. Another mistake is using silence as a test. You disappear to see if he cares, to measure his interest, to confirm your worth. But that mindset already puts you in a position of dependence. You are still waiting for him to define how valuable you are, and there is something even more uncomfortable to face. Sometimes, nothing happens because there was not enough investment from him to begin with. That is the truth most avoid. Not every connection has depth. Not every man will react. And silence exposes that reality without filters. But this is where the real power is hidden. Because when nothing happens, you are forced to see clearly. No illusions, no mixed signals, no false hope. Just the truth. And the truth gives you something that chasing never will. Clarity. Clarity to stop investing where there is no return. Clarity to redirect your attention. Clarity to finally choose yourself without waiting to be chosen. So if nothing happens when you disappear, it is not a failure. It is information. And what you do with that information is what defines your next move. The real power is not in disappearing, but in your presence. By the time I reached the end of those 3 days, one thing became undeniable. The power was never in the act of disappearing. It was in what that distance forced me to become. Because anyone can stop replying. Anyone can go silent for a few days. But if nothing changes internally, the moment you return, you fall back into the same pattern. The same urgency, the same need, the same dynamic. Real power is not absence. It is presence with boundaries. It is being able to engage without losing yourself, to respond without feeling pressure, to show interest without over-investing. That is what changes how you are perceived. When you know you can walk away, your presence carries weight. Your words are not driven by fear of losing him. Your actions are not attempts to secure attention. They come from choice. And people feel that difference immediately. You are no longer trying to be liked. You are deciding what deserves your attention. That shift is subtle, but it transforms everything. Because now, you are not reacting to his behavior. You are operating from your own standard. And that standard creates something most people never achieve: respect. Not because you demanded it, but because your behavior made it clear that your time, your energy, and your attention are not easily available. That is what makes someone valuable. Not how often they show up, but how they choose to. After 3 days, I was not the same woman. After those 3 days, I thought the biggest result would be his reaction, his message, his attention coming back. But that was not the real change. The real change was that I no longer needed it. Something shifted in a way I could not ignore. The silence that once made me anxious now felt like space. The urge to check my phone was gone. The need to be seen by him stopped controlling how I felt. And that is when everything became clear. It was never about making him chase me. It was about breaking the version of me that was always chasing. Because the moment you stop seeking validation, you stop accepting less than you deserve. You stop negotiating your value. You stop settling for inconsistency. And from that place, everything changes. If he comes back, you are no longer impressed by attention. You observe actions. You choose if it is enough. If he does not come back, you are no longer waiting. You move forward without looking back. That is the difference. Before, your peace depended on his presence. Now, his presence depends on your standards. And once you reach that point, there is no going back to who you used to be. If you felt this shift, there is something even deeper you need to understand next. There is a way to make someone think about you constantly without saying a single word. And that changes the game completely.